Hi, everybody, and welcome to Conversations. To wrap our series for the year, we turn back to journalism tonight and its role in society and the courage it can take to do investigative reporting. I think if you've tuned in tonight, you already know what Mother Jones is. One of the things I love about Mother Jones is the tagline, fearless, smart, fearless journalism. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what it takes to do that kind of journalism that Mother Jones does, but also the political climate it's working in and the courage it takes to do that. So I want to welcome our guests tonight, Steve Katz and Monika Bauerlein, who just joined us. Welcome, you guys. So good to see you.
It's really good to see you.
Hello, so great to be there. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Monika. So we're going to dive right in. Monika, I'm going to start with you. It's never been easy to do fearless journalism, but it's really hard right now. Here's what I'm interested in. How hard has it been for you guys to do investigative journalism in the climate we're living in when there's so much misinformation and there's Donald Trump?
Where to begin? I think there are a couple of pieces to that. One is, it's an embarrassment of riches. Every stone you turn over, there's a scandal under it, which actually means that one of the challenges is triaging, which any journalist is familiar with at the best of times because there are always more stories to pursue, but it has really been kind of a defining challenge of the last 4 years. Every day brings an outrage that should consume the news cycle for about a year and a half. And so one of the things that we could tell our audience was really hungry for was helping them understand what mattered the most. And of course, we don't know that all the time either. So we have to make the best bet that we can at any given time. So one of the bets, for instance, that we made, even though it was not the most popular or sexy story all the time, was to stick with the Russia scandal and what it meant. Because in the view of David Korn and the other folks on our team who covered that, it was never about whether, Trump had a secret channel to the Kremlin. It was about the fact that this candidate and then this president put his own interest ahead of the national interest and ahead of the interest of the people of the United States. And so just continuing to come back to that theme and showing how it played out at every single turn, from the Mueller investigation to the investigations in the House and Senate to ultimately the somewhat inconclusive impeachment hearings, was really important. And that did allow us to not only provide a service to audiences, but also build the credibility with people in the know that they could come to us with information and that we would treat it right and set it in the proper context. So establishing a priority and sticking with it is a big piece of it.
Right, and I remember back when Trump was first elected, I can't quite remember the timeline on it, but I remember the New York Times saying, reported first in Mother Jones. In this, was to do with the Russia scandal?
Back before the election in 2016, when what we now know as the Steele dossier was circulating in several US newsrooms, Mother Jones was the only news organization that reported that it existed and that the FBI was looking into it. And the day that story appeared was October 31st, 2016, so Halloween, quite appropriately. And the Times that same day ran a piece that said, the FBI doesn't think there's a there when it comes to Trump and Russia. And so it took them a couple of years to, they ran a few stories after that basically said no one reported on this Steele dossier before the election. And each time we would have to call them up and say, actually, and, then they finally got it.
And acknowledged you guys. And did you get like pushback as you were doing that?
Oh, yeah. So, when you asked about courage, and it's, I would not talk up my own courage because that would be a disgusting thing to do. But I do think that everybody on the team had to really take a hard look at what the consequences might be of going with this information. And that's something that at Mother Jones, we've been so fortunate to be able to do without having to look over our shoulder at a corporate boss or, shareholders or, any of the sort of overly cautious entities that would be looking at something other than the public interest. Linda, that's something that you also are in a fortunate position to do. And it makes all the difference when you're accountable to the truth and to your readers and not to somebody who's worried about giving offense, for instance, to powerful people.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that more later. I think that's such an important point and about what you guys do. I am really struck though, I watched that reporting, but like now that we're actually talking, just thinking about what that really must have been like, because you were the force, it was like Donald Trump, which is, like going up against a mafia family and a criminal organization almost. And, or maybe, or totally, I don't know what you think about that, how criminal they are, but, and also Putin had a role in that story. Do you think, were you having sleepless nights? Steve, I guess you're quietly sitting over there, but you're the publisher. Like, what was that like for you? Monika.
I think she's telling her children to knock it off. Monika, I love the drawings behind you today. Thank you for decorating the back of the
Those represent the evolution of my teen as an artist.
Exactly. So, Linda, let me just say, first of all, it's really, really great to see everybody here and to be with you again. And we miss coming up and seeing you in Vancouver, and really enjoy and appreciate having the National Observer as part of our media world too. And it's very important. So it's great to be here. We had a lot of things to worry about in the first years of the Trump administration. It was disorienting, as you know. It was painful. We were in some ways out front of understanding the kind of threat that this new regime was going to pose, not only to democratic norms and practice in the U.S., but also to journalism as a whole. And we were, in that sense, we were exposed. But I'm not aware myself of any direct threat from either Russian security services or the folks in enforcement in the Trump administration. And actually, I don't know if this is taking it in the direction that you want to go in or not, but one of the interesting things about the way that journalism has played out in the last 4 years, and we have our own strong critique of a lot of what our counterparts do in the States, no question about it. But in some respects, the journalistic field really stepped up over the last 4 years. The quality of the work, the ability to stay on a story and do deep dive investigative reporting, not only from us, but from the Times and the Post to NBC and Bloomberg and tons of other media organizations in the States. I mean, there was no lack of really excellent reporting being generated on the misdeeds of this administration and the cruelty of the policies behind it, and the change in the political culture that was coming about. It's a quite different scenario than it was even just a few years ago. Very different, complex, very different practice. And a lot of our brethren and sisters took their time to catch up in their understanding to what we pretty much had a handle on right from the get-go. But the reporting itself was very good. I think both the Post and the Times were out front on this stuff. There were other media outlets as well. We were playing a part in it too. I think one of the interesting questions going to be going forward is what happens to the editorial stance of the mainstream papers now, the mainstream media outlets now, that there's some sense of a restoration of normality in Washington. They all go to the same cocktail parties, and they all went to the same schools. They all circulate through the same think tanks and conferences and stuff. Our guys don't. So I think we're going to see it's potentially anyway, and I don't know what Monika and I haven't talked about this, but I can envision a return to a internal conflict within the journalism scene about how to cover a Democrat when we're not all part of the quote unquote resistance, because we're not.
Particularly after such instability over the last 4 years. We have a question from a participant Doug Baker. Given that the time has passed and the scrutiny it's received, how much of the Steele dossier do you think is true? Monika?
I wouldn't, one of the reasons why we didn't publish the actual dossier or most of the details in it was because it is just impossible journalistically to ascertain that. There is a lot more known about it, and people have done excellent reporting in the last couple of years. But I think the story of the dossier was often mischaracterized in the media, in part because there was, kind of salacious and flashy stuff in it. When David Corn first started looking into it, of course, he tried to ascertain whether we could actually confirm the details. And having discovered that we could not, he made the decision of not reporting the details, but instead reporting on the fact that these allegations were, he was able to ascertain that the source was credible and that the FBI was looking into it. Looking back now, I would say the thrust of it, which was that Donald Trump as a candidate and a president was looking out for his own business interests, including with respect to Russia, and his own political interests ahead of the public's interest, has been extremely well documented. Some of the unverified claims in it, remain just as unverified as they were then, and some of them have been debunked. And that was always clear from the document itself, that nobody should assume that the details of what it said had been confirmed.
Back to now, this period between when Trump actually leaves the White House and now seems to be a dangerous period, particularly because of the actual overt attempt to overthrow an election. Can you shed some light on how dangerous it really is?
I think it's extraordinarily dangerous, not in as much as there is a chance of Donald Trump not leaving the White House, but in creating an environment where a substantial portion of the public is disengaged from the sort of fundamentals of the democratic process. It's going to be very, very hard to reestablish a consensus that elections have meaning after this. And given that the people who are being deliberately peeled away from, kind of a really foundational engagement with the democratic process are the same people who have been targeted by disinformation and manipulation for a number of years now. I think we're in some really uncertain waters and dangerous times.
Linda, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
If you think about it, so I think as of today, Ari Berman, our voting rights reporter, posted on Twitter that I think Joe Biden had a popular vote lead of like 7 million people, and 53% of the popular vote and 306 electoral votes and so on. Under normal circumstances, the headline of the election would be landslide victory. In US politics, 52, 53% is a big win for a presidential candidate. And what we're seeing is an attempt by the GOP and the Trump administration either to deny the validity of the election in Trump's case because he's a sociopath, or to delegitimize, as Monica's saying, the election process itself on the part of the rest of the Republican Party, and change the narrative. And we'll see what happens in Georgia in January with this vote coming up. With these 2 senatorial seat runoffs, the degree to which registered Republicans fail to vote or not. And I think to Monica's point about whether people will disengage from the electoral process, that'll be an early indicator of how that's playing out on the right.
That's really sobering from both of you. And I want to read a quote. Churchill said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Steve, you're smiling. Have you heard this?
No, but I mean, wow, Churchill. Sorry. Churchill and Mother Jones together. My mind is kind of trying to process what that
Okay. Okay. But basically the idea that, the Republicans have created a big an enormous propaganda machine. And now they're actually creating the alternate reality that we started hearing about 4 years ago is taking on, really enormous proportions. And, is this really dangerous or is this just theater?
Well, it's dangerous theater. I think, there's a sorcerer's apprentice quality to it that, and, we saw this with the Tea Party too in the United States, where Republicans created and unleashed demons that they could then not control. And we all have demons. The left has demons, the right has demons, humans have demons, and you nurture and encourage them. And it becomes very, very difficult to control them, even when you believe you're manipulating them at the outset. I was born in Germany. I grew up there and in Italy, and the Churchill quote has always resonated with me because Europe has a lot of history with getting people to believe absurdities and commit atrocities. I think the North American continent has a lot of resilience against that sort of thing in a way that these European countries did not. There is a lot of democratic infrastructure and civic strength, both in the United States and Canada. But I think this election showed us that it is a lot more fragile than we thought. When you look at in 2016, you could make a case that a lot of people were casting a protest vote. In 2020, you have to say this is a commitment, that there is a narrow minority that favors essentially authoritarianism. There's a long way to crawl back from that.
Yeah. Another question from our listeners. This is from Helena Cinnamon. She is asking for more information about the possibility of Trump pardoning himself. Do you guys have any insight on that?
It definitely is, there's a mechanism for doing that. It will not necessarily help him because he can't pardon himself for offenses at the state level or even the local level. He's being investigated, for instance, by the Attorney General of the state of New York, and the pardon is completely meaningless in that context. But I expect him to use the pardon power extensively, not just for the actual benefit that it confers, but also out of spite, to show that the pardon power is a perfect authoritarian signal that I alone have the power to do this, and that's what he's going to want to do extensively in the closing weeks.
Well, and another question from Ted: how dangerous is Michael Flynn and his assertion that the Army should oversee another election? Does he have support in the ranks of the Army?
I don't want to dominate here, so Steve, you should chime in at any point. I will say that there's been really great journalism on the way that extremists have targeted the military and law enforcement and have infiltrated those institutions. It is to the credit of the US military that it has also pushed back on that and has been quite forceful in saying that it would not be part of a coup. So I think Michael Flynn and some of these other figures are dangerous, much more so because they spread dangerous conspiracy theories that their authority and legitimacy on the right allows them to elevate. Michael Flynn has essentially endorsed QAnon, and people will listen to somebody like that on it and believe those kinds of theories. So that's where I see the danger.
Monika, thank you. And Steve, a question for you. So just, on the topic of courage, let's talk about the billionaire who sued you guys and the monumental legal victory you achieved.
Sure. This is going back to 2012, actually, I think. David Korn, during the run up to the 2012 election, published a story about something that Mitt Romney said regarding the 47% of the American voters who would never support a Republican and Mitt Romney because they were takers and not makers. These were simpler times back then, when a video of a candidate for president could actually derail the narrative of a campaign for 3 weeks, which is what happened. And so that was sort of the context. We published a squib of a story online, short little thing, on by our reporter Stephanie Mensimer, and Stephanie is from Utah. Grew up out there, and she went back and looked at how a billionaire based out of Idaho Falls, Idaho, a guy named Frank Vandersloot, very deeply involved in the Church of the Latter-day Saints, had changed his political giving from 2008 to 2012, during which time the Supreme Court had changed the rules for private giving and basically unleashed a flood of dark money. And Vandersloot took advantage of that. He also happened to be one of the main funders of anti-marriage equality legislation and initiatives in California and Idaho and everywhere. Went after judges who supported expansion of rights to people in various kinds of underrepresented groups, and also ran a company that had been investigated by and cited by state and federal trade commissions for pyramid schemes. Well, he didn't like the story. This was all of I think it was less than, it was like a page long. It was a quick story that Stephanie did as an illustration. He didn't like the story, and came out to California and sat down with Monika and our editor-in-chief, Clara Jeffrey, and explained for what, 4 hours why he didn't like the story. And with our attorney, Clara and Monika, in their wisdom, said, well, you know, we will review the story and check it out. And we did make a couple of updates to the story, but it stands. It's published. It's still up there. And a few days just prior to the expiration of the time limits when he could file, we received notice that he was filing a suit in Idaho State Court accusing us of defamation. This was now early 2013, I believe. Was that right? 2013 or 2014? And yeah, so
it was in early 2013.
2013. Therein followed 2 years of intensive litigation, and all Frank really wanted from us was to shut us down completely. I mean, it was not about right or wrong. It was a punishment lawsuit to demonstrate his power to use the courts to destroy people who opposed what he stood for. It's not the first time he'd done it, but it's the first time he'd come up against a publication that actually had insurance to take care of this thing, had good lawyers, and also had the truth on our side. So we were worried. I mean, we were worried that it was going to go to jury trial and that we would lose, that we'd have to appeal to the Idaho Supreme Court. But in the end, and I remember the day that this happened, I was in New York and got a text from Monika about it. The judge, to her own, frankly, to her own dismay, as it turned out, ruled in our favor, and basically said that the truth is an affirmative defense against a claim of defamation. And Vandersloot lost. And this was in the context of other cases that were beginning to surface and still are, where billionaires were using the courts to destroy journalism organizations that had gone crosswise with them. And of course, the most famous one down in the States was the suit that Peter Thiel brought against Gawker and essentially shut down the company through the use of the courts. So we were part of that wave of trouble. It was one of the potential threats that, as the Trump administration was getting rolling, we were looking at. Monika prepared a pretty thorough list of, it was about 4 pages of potential threats that journalism might be exposed to, much of which has come to pass, some of which fortunately did not.
Can you give us a summary of those threats? The ones that did come to pass, particularly.
Well, for me, what was most interesting was that I thought that there would be direct use of congressional investigations and executive agencies to harass, pressure, and go after unfriendly journalism outfits. There's a long history of using grand juries in the States to go after journalists. For instance, there's history recently of unfriendly congressional committees that have done the same thing around unfriendly reporting. That was happening, but because the Trump administration set as one of its key talking points that journalism is the enemy of the people, and it used that to mobilize opinion, it's almost as if they didn't have to do anything else. They didn't want to go down the path of actually testing whether it was true or not. That wasn't the point. The point was to delegitimize journalism and a fact-based world that you can verify and then debate over in the eyes of their supporters. So it didn't actually, I'm just speculating here, but it didn't actually serve the fundamental function of building a base of true believers that I think, again, calling us the enemy of the people and going after, making the rallies that Trump did kind of theater of abusing journalists just doing their job sufficed. So I don't know, Monika, we haven't really talked about this in retrospect. I'm curious what you saw as kind of come into play.
I think you said it well.
Yeah.
Looking forward, now that we're, moving into hopefully a new era, what are the key challenges that you think you see ahead for journalists, or you see ahead for independent media, particularly for journalists working in independent media without a massive corporate structure around them?
Same as they were, but getting, we're at the knife's edge, I think, between losing the economic and public trust base for journalism. On the one hand, the economic model that traditionally supported journalism is evaporating. The reader support and charity model, I think we don't understand yet how, what the scope of it can be. It may be potentially larger than it has been. It may not have a lot of room to grow. So that's the economic challenge. And the public trust challenge is what Steve just described, that there has been this systematic, at this point, decades-long attack on the relationship between journalism and the public that it serves. And we see, on the one hand, a much stronger relationship. All of you here in this conversation are people who have really chosen to be part of the enterprise of seeking truth and getting it out. And there are a lot of people, we should not forget that there still remains a substantial majority, even in the United States, of people who trust, for instance, the media much more than they do the president. But there is an erosion here. And so we could see, I think, over the coming years, either a coming together of different publics that recognize that a democratic society needs truth and needs an independent press to function as part of its immunity system, so to speak, a metaphor that hits a little too close to home at the moment. Or on the other hand, we could see, kind of an unraveling as what's left of the traditional media structures falls apart. I mean, in the United States, local journalism is about to almost entirely evaporate. And the structures replacing it are not growing nearly fast enough. So we could be at a tipping point in either direction.
Monika, to dig in a little deeper there, everything you're describing, and now in the atmosphere of COVID and a global pandemic, and a pandemic that's really out of control in the United States, and a lot of disinformation around that. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what that means for readers, publications, particularly what you guys are doing? Like, are you seeing changes with your audience and how they're responding? What's it like for you to operate now in this environment?
There's definitely an arc to it. I'm sure this happened for you as well, but at the beginning, when we all, really confronted the pandemic, there was a surge of interest in news. People just went, and I think this is heartening, that when something crazy and terrifying, sorry about the background noise, happens, people turn to journalists to find out what's going on. That's really important. When that link is broken, we're really in trouble. I think at the same time, there is an overload that people are experiencing where they want to turn away. And I think as journalists, we need to respect that and help curate the information that we share. And this comes back to really prioritizing what matters and not coming at you with 1,500 different pinpricks all day long. one of the things that the pandemic brought that I really had not expected, that I have discovered in the last month or so as part of some reporting that we did on Facebook and others, to say, Facebook at this point is in large part a disinformation platform, is that disinformation really took off when people were stuck at home. There is a lot of incredibly malicious information that made it into people's streams, particularly in the spring of this year, that has pulled a lot of people into wormholes of conspiracy that are extremely dangerous. And I think there will be long-term consequences to that. Hopefully, we'll see a little bit of a reset as society emerges at some point over the coming year from its hidey hole, but that's a real danger that we, again, as journalists, have a responsibility to identify and combat.
Steve, Monika has mentioned a razor's edge that we're on now and wormholes of extremity. And I hear a lot of the amazing language that I read in Monika's letters that she sends out to explain why journalism matters so much in such a compelling way. And I just want to take a moment to say to everybody, if you're not subscribing to Mother Jones, really encourage you to. They really are doing just such outstanding journalism. And even if it's just to get on Monika's mailing list, it's worth it, because you have an amazing storytelling ability, Monika. But Steve, I just wondered like what you're seeing in that realm too, and how you're thinking about the disinformation and COVID. And you're in San Francisco. You're both in San Francisco, I should mention. Yeah.
Monika and I were trading drafts of a letter that we're sending out to our folks next week. This week we were trading edits back and forth, and one of the things that she pointed to, which I found really interesting, has to do with we haven't really, as a technological culture, fully reckoned with the impact of these social media platforms on the discourse. I mean, the attitudes and opinions about Facebook and Twitter and Google and so on and so forth are definitely nowhere near as positive as they were even a couple of years ago. But the notion that, and this is what I was going to get to first of all, is that folks don't necessarily go to Facebook to find the most extreme, outrageous conspiracy theories of how the world works. They're talking to their friends. They're looking at Star Trek. They're, looking at pretty animals. But the algorithms that the companies feed oftentimes have been gamed and structured in such a way that it leads people, it invites people and seduces folks down that wormhole of misinformation. And it's, there is a responsibility of people to pay attention to what they're seeing in the media and on social media. Media literacy for everyone is a really crucial part of kind of contemporary civics. But the fundamental problem is not so much with the consumers in this way of looking at things as with the delivery mechanisms, the platforms and the producers of the content, and the way in which these companies actually create opportunities for actors to weaponize information and use it in a public setting. And I think that, first of all, above all else right now, in terms of the information environment in which we're operating, could be the most dangerous and unresolved problem that we're facing as a society right now. For Mother Jones, I was just going to say, on a much more pragmatic level, and Linda, maybe this is what you're getting at. When the COVID emergency really hit last spring, and we all went into remote shut down. The
Mhm.
economy took a turn for the worse. We were very concerned, as I'm sure you guys were too, about where folks would draw the line about what they were going to support, what they were going to subscribe to, what they were going to give money to. And so we started to really track what's happening with our contributors and our subscribers. And fortunately, and there's really a measure of the confidence that folks have in the work that you guys do and that we do, they stayed with us.
Mhm.
And it was a remarkable thing to see. I mean, it just gives me chills to think about the decisions that individual folks made during that time period to say, you know what, we're going to stay with these guys. We're going to respond to their appeals, which, you know, it's how you get the money. And they did. This happened once before during the 2008, 2009 recession for us. And we saw the same thing happen. And it was really extraordinary to see it happen again. So it's not, so we definitely avoided the worst possible scenario. And it's really great also to see how the Observer has really ridden through this time. And I know you had a really successful subscription campaign just recently. And I mean, this is really important. This is the way that journalism happens. And these days, it's not about advertising, and you really don't want a billionaire running the show. It gets you in all sorts of knots and pretzel problems. And you don't want to just give over your pages to advertisers. So what do we have to play with at this point? First of all, is the support of our own readers, and that's working.
Thank you, Steve. It's interesting on the topic of Facebook and, you know, the where it's taking us into sort of this unknowable future. You know, we know where we are now, but it's pretty hard to conceive of where we're going to be with it. And you know, I hear, I'm in touch with the Facebook folks in Canada from time to time, and in these conversations, you know, the position of Facebook is, you don't want us to regulate speech. That's not our job. I just wondered if you guys, what your thoughts are on that.
That's such a cop out. I'm sorry, but you know, that wore out its welcome, you know, 10 years ago. And I do appreciate the dilemma that Facebook has. We do not want them to regulate speech and to be the arbiter of what can be said and what can't be said. But they know that what they sell, that the core of their product is not the speech, it's the algorithm. And it is the algorithm that amplifies speech and pushes it in front of people who are not there looking for it. You know, when your sister-in-law or your, you know, niece or your uncle is looking for, you know, is on Facebook looking for, you know, pictures of their grandkids, and what comes at them is, you know, anti-mask propaganda followed, you know, which is really, you know, interesting and clickable. And so you click on something and then the algorithm says, aha, and it serves you up ever more extreme and misleading content. The problem is not that people are posting the extreme and misleading content. It's that the Facebook is pushing it into the feeds of people who had no interest in it, in searching it out to begin with. And that is something that has the potential of being regulated, but much more easily could be fixed by Facebook itself.
Just to put a fine point on that. So if the algorithm is pushing content towards readers, there's not a whole lot of light between what that is and what a publication does. And that's the thing that Facebook really wants to avoid, because if they're a publisher, there's a whole different set of rules. I mean, it is quite complicated because of the platform, but that's a whole set of rules that they don't want to be involved in. So that's thing one. The other thing, honestly, is US anti-monopoly practice is missing in action here. And there is a credible case that all of these platforms have monopoly power in the market and need deep scrutiny and to be broken up. So there are some arguments to be made for rethinking the way content is delivered and the way the corporate structure is managed on Facebook, on Twitter, on Google, all of them. So.
I guess for those things to happen, we're going to need a much stronger regulatory environment. And I don't know if you think do you think that's where we're going? And do you think journalists are doing enough to play a role in bringing that about?
I don't at this point think there's consensus within the journalism field about what to do with the platforms. It's I don't. I'm not really an expert on this at all, but from what I can tell, really the center of gravity of debate about this is within the kind of technology critique community and their conversations with folks who have history in U.S. anti-monopoly practice and regulatory practice. That's my hand. I don't see at this point U.S. journalism entities really taking the lead on this at all.
So you were earlier in the interview, Steve, you were praising you were saying that you really feel like journalism stepped up considerably during the last 4 years. There's another point of view that says that journalism benefited tremendously from Donald Trump and was complicit with Donald Trump. And I just wondered what both of you thought about that. Monica?
Sorry. I was just going to say the two things can be true at the same time.
Sure.
Go for it.
I mean, yeah, Jeff Zucker said Trump was the best thing that ever happened to CBS. So they were looking for eyeballs and traffic, and they got it.
But who that benefits is not journalism. It's, the bottom lines of some of these, corporate entities whose business it is to aggregate eyeballs and sell them to advertisers. For journalism, I think these past 4 years have been an unmitigated disaster because they have not been good for democracy, and journalism requires democracy to exist. It has, certainly Trump has motivated some excellent journalism and has in some ways strengthened the bonds between audiences, and he has made the case for what we do. And I think, Steve, that's where you are going, so I'm handing it back to you.
Okay. Linda, I was just going to say, I wonder if there's something analogous going on with you guys in terms of the intense concentration of media ownership in Canada and the kind of hollowing out of local news across the provinces, and how, the Canadian government is attempting to position itself differently than the US government is on how to respond, at least so far. I'm just curious what you're seeing in terms of, how the Canadian media has performed with your version of this kind of growing chasm of facts and, which reality are we actually talking about?
Well, statistics in Canada show that Canadians have more, still trust the media and trust the government considerably more than Americans do. So that's one major difference that perhaps it's called because we have the CBC that is kind of this big umbrella, that millions of Canadians listen to. And then what the government has done, I think, is quite amazing in, funding, like committing nearly $1 billion to fund local journalism. And, this program just kind of came into effect right as the pandemic bore down upon us. And they secured the jobs of, several hundred journalists, created new jobs, in some cases secured other jobs. And that's not a big number on the American landscape, but in Canada, it's very significant, and it meant journalism positions in very remote areas, very underserved areas. So I'm very, I'm really impressed by what they've done. And I think that it does provide a kind of anchor, for journalism and for, sort of the conversation between citizens and government, which in a lot of cases really, that's what the news media is kind of a conduit for that conversation and that engagement. But yeah, so I think, we really are in a different world in Canada, in my opinion. I don't know what the people on the call feel about that. Sure, there are a lot of different opinions about it. Nothing's perfect up here at all, but I feel like, it's pretty good. And but I guess a question that arises for me from what's happened over the last years is, are we all doing a good enough job in educating the public about what we really do? I know you guys are really working hard to do that. Do you feel that you get through? Like, do you feel that your community understands what it takes to do the kind of investigative reporting you guys do that, really holds very powerful people to account, and that, can be that kind of game-changing investigative reporting? Monica?
It's always a challenge, I would say, because, as journalists, we hesitate to make ourselves the story, despite the fact that our egos are, nothing to sniff at. But one of the things that has really animated me in my work is having that conversation with audiences, using the tools of journalism to report on how journalism works. Making that transparent, showing the economics of it, certainly. I remember a few years ago, I wrote a column about a big investigation that we did where our reporter went inside a private prison and, took a job there and worked there, and then ultimately took 18 months to come up with this very powerful investigation. And I had a line in it that I, hesitated to put in, and just sort of, and cut a few times and then just left in because I thought, well, everybody kind of knows this, but I'll put it in anyway. And I said, the advertising that appears with this story when you read it will bring in, about $5,000, after about 1 million or 1.5 million people have read the story. The cost of the project itself is, in excess of, choose your number, but in excess of $300,000, certainly, for everything that went into it. That was an eye opener for people. I still hear about that when I go out and talk to people about the work that we do. And it was a demonstration of how much it is that we take for granted, that we really shouldn't, in showing how this work happens and how it gets paid for.
I think you guys do an amazing job of that. And, it's interesting though, you have, a much bigger audience than we do. But still, I don't know if you feel this way. I know I do. It's like we have a sizable audience ourselves, but like, I'm always aware of how many people we can't reach, how many people we aren't talking to. Do they understand? Do you feel like the general public kind of has a grasp of this?
No. So let's, I think we need to back up a second. One is that this enemy of the people meme has really dominated people's discussions about journalism and media and fake news and what can you trust and what can't you trust. And that's been the driver the last several years. Within the world, the much smaller universe of people who are actively searching for good journalism and investigative reporting, yes, I think the case has been made effectively, not just by us, but by others, that the traditional business model for quality journalism is no longer commercial in nature. That is, when even the Post and the Times, even with all of their, with Jeff Bezos behind the Post and the Sulzberger family behind the Times, nonetheless, the switch that both of those leading companies made to a subscription-based rather than an advertising-based revenue model matters in terms of people's understanding of how to pay for journalism. That hasn't been across the board. It's very, very difficult for local news organizations with a limited market to do that. It's much more complex to pull it off at the local level, but it can be done with the right kind of community attention. It's really a very different world in television and cable than in print or digital. So it's an uneven kind of unfolding of this strategy of really developing and maintaining and building relationships with your readers as a basis not only for audience development but for revenue. Mm-hmm. So it's a really complicated, in that sense, environment that we're operating in.
Very complicated. I want to tell you guys, I'm looking over at the chat and I'm seeing Daniel McCash just sent a note saying, I'm already a subscriber to the Observer, but I chose this interview to subscribe to Mother Jones as well and elected to add $10 surcharge to my delivery fee. Daniel, I'm going to say thank you. And there's so many great questions and conversation going on over here. But our time is, we're coming to the end of our time. So I just wanted to ask you if there's anything else either one of you want to say about the state of journalism right now, where things are at, where you want it to go.
I'm very worried, as you heard me say, but I'm also very hopeful that these, certainly in the United States, but I think for much of the world, these challenges to democracy and democratic, small d democratic values are bringing out the best in people in a lot of ways. And we've seen a real outpouring of support and interest and, just of people connecting with the public sphere that I don't think would have happened had it not been for these crises that we've seen. I've been, when I was out, talking to people in the real world, which hasn't happened for a little while, talked to here in the Bay Area, for instance, I would meet a lot of people in the tech industry who would come up to me and say, I understand now that I can't outsource democracy. I can't make this somebody else's job. And likewise, I think people are taking charge of the fact that they do need to be informed. They do need to take responsibility of where they get their information. You don't have to be a news junkie and consume news 24/7 to kind of take a certain amount of control of how information comes to you and how it's supported. And that has really happened in the past few years to an extent that I think nobody would have expected. And that is I don't believe that that's a change, that's a flash in the pan. I think that is a long-term recommitment by people to the public sphere. And we see that in your success, Linda, and the National Observer's success as well. So it's not going to take, it's not an insurmountable challenge that we face.
Monika, Steve, both of you, thank you so much. It's inspiring to talk to you. And I also want to really thank all of you on the call. I'm sure a lot of you are subscribers to National Observer. That means so much to us. And as we come to the end of 2020, I'm sad to say this is our last conversation of the year. It's been quite an amazing experience having these interviews with, inspiring people like Monika and Steve. And I look forward to being back in 2020. Monica and Steve, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And
See
thanks
you
to
in-
everyone who joined.
Thank you, everyone who joined. We really appreciate your feedback and your ideas, you in the audience, so keep them coming. Best wishes to all of you. See you next year.